Hi guys, welcome to another episode of CP4SA. Today we'll be speaking marketing with someone who has a background in financial management, but we'll also be touching on why the move from one area to another. Help me welcome Adithi Naidu. Hi Adithi.
Hi.
Thank you very much for taking the time to join us on this episode.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Now, for the people at home who maybe don't know you, do you want to take a minute just to tell them a bit more about yourself?
Yep, sure. So, like you said, my educational background is in finance. I studied business science, finance at UCT. I started working for Anglo American. My professional career began with them in 2015. I started off as a commodity analyst, so worked in the pricing team, and then moved on to strategy. Spent some time with De Beers in the UK, working in their consumer research team, and that's where my journey into marketing began. And since then have transitioned into the Platinum business unit, working in the market development team, which basically what we do is we look at long-term demand for Platinum, identify new segments, and try and stimulate existing demand and create new demand segments that are sustainable for Platinum metals.
Yeah, I think as a layman, whenever I hear anyone speak about marketing, my first thought is, well, advertising or a version of advertising. Would you say they're related? Would you say they're very different? What's your experience with it, I guess, as well as, what exactly you're doing within the marketing space?
Yeah, and I think marketing is a very broad term. I didn't study it, but I really quite enjoyed the type of work that you get to do. I think it ranges from very sort of research-focused type of work right down to advertising, which is what you and I see every day, but also encompasses things like business-to-business marketing, which is what Anglo American does more specifically. My journey with De Beers, or with Forever Market De Beers, strongly focused on that end-user consumer marketing space, whereas the role that I have now kind of looks beyond that.
Yeah. Well, you move from, I guess, a more financial approach to marketing. Was this on purpose or was it circumstantial? And I mean, looking back, is this something that you would do again?
I definitely would, and I think it was very much a natural progression. I think when you start off at school and you're 16, you have to pick subjects that, determine your trajectory. You're 18, you have to pick a degree that determines your entire career. What I studied was broad enough that it will allow me to experience a lot, or allow me to go into a lot of different types of work. And marketing, or the role that I'm currently in, was a natural progression of my interests and where I actually found the exciting parts of work. And through my journey with my career, I was lucky enough to be afforded a diverse range of roles. And that's something that I really, really looked for and worked hard to get, so that I was never pigeonholed into being the degree or the stream that I decided at 18, when I admittedly probably wasn't as knowledgeable as you could be having the experience that you have now.
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. I've had a few people who've come on this show say the same thing, that at 18 you're expected to make one of the biggest decisions in your life. And I mean, within that 4 years of studying, sometimes you realize that this is not where I want to be. So I think it's very good that you got the opportunity to still, find yourself after having your degree as well. So it's pretty cool. So you mentioned that you work for Anglo American, which is a mining company. And I think when it comes to mining companies, there's always, operational roles versus non-operational roles. So I think when people think mining, careers like geology, mining engineering, survey, they're the first to pop into your mind. But I think any big mining industry or any big mining company will have things like marketing, will have things like legal, will have things like accountants. What's your experience, I guess, being in a company like that, but working on the non-operational side of that company?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question, because I mean, a lot of the time you're in a situation where, I've been corporate head office based my entire career at Anglo, and then you get the opportunity to see what the operational side of it looks like, but you're not in depth involved in it. But I think it's all about your perspective and how you view that, and it's really important to understand that you're part of a much bigger team and a much bigger community that's trying to get product A from point 1 to point 2, and you understand your role within that. And with that kind of view, you also respect all the different types of people that add value along that journey. And that's for me how I kind of viewed it, because working at a corporate level, you have to respect the operations and what they do. And there's no other alternative, and that for me was a really big realization going into mining. It was never on my radar when I started working, but it's definitely a decision I would make again, mainly because it's also such a close industry to the heart of South Africa, and that's been a wonderful journey for me personally.
Well, you mentioned working a bit with De Beers, and I think anyone who sort of reads up on companies like De Beers would know just how well done marketing, it has done in the past. I mean, everything from what was the saying with the diamonds are forever, and just the role they played in marketing is probably one of the biggest reasons why they're so big today. Without getting into any of the maybe confidential stuff, what would you say about Platinum when it comes to their marketing? What is it that they're currently trying to get into? So just think about what it is that you can share, and maybe just share with us now.
So I think from a Platinum marketing point of view, so we, like I said, we look at kind of the long-term demand segments for it. So it's not as traditional marketing as De Beers would do, or any sort of consumer product, but Platinum in itself and PGMs in general are very diverse in their applications. So there's no one-size-fits-all approach to kind of get that message to the end user. You have the jewelry segment, which is strongly consumer aligned. You have the investment segment, which is obviously speaking to investors and people who are interested in growing their financial wealth. And then you have the huge industrial sector that varies so largely. And your approach for each of those different things to understand and position Platinum to each different stakeholder has to be adaptable in those areas. So I think PGMs in general give you that flexibility in how you deliver the messaging around what the metal can do for those different applications. And that's kind of where we're kind of plugging that gap.
Yeah, and I suppose if you think about it, what sort of individual should consider following this sort of journey? So what kind of individual should consider getting into marketing? And you can look at it either from a professional or just a personality sort of trait.
Sure. I mean, for my entire life, I've always loved the creative industry and creative space. I don't know if that's where my strength is, but it's something that I had a keen interest in. But I've also enjoyed strong research, and that's kind of where my career started off, and that's something that I really enjoyed, and it's something that I wanted to pursue. And this kind of combined the two, because you have to kind of think a little bit outside of the box when you're looking at that. In the consumer marketing space, I learned so much about understanding your consumer and getting down to the very nitty-gritty around what makes them tick, what they enjoy, how their lifestyles, where they live, affects their purchasing behavior, those sorts of things which are, you can only get that through intense data collection, and understanding who those people are. That's fascinating. It's a really fascinating place to be. But then translating that information into something that's actionable, that is tangible, that people can see and resonates with them, that's also something that's a completely different, entirely different to anything I've ever experienced. So I think it's somebody who kind of likes the opaqueness or the vagueness of translating data into something actionable that relates to people. But you can also be a very sort of technical kind of person, and find your space in this area.
Yeah, well, I think in conversations I've had with you recently, I mean, you mentioned your particular interest in, how people manage their finances, or more rather, how you personally manage your finances. Do you want to share a little bit more about your journey into that avenue?
Yeah, I think that's something that myself and Kira, my other half, feel very passionate about, mainly because, creating wealth for yourself, but for your future family, your children, your grandchildren, and also supporting a lifestyle that you envision for them is something that you kind of have to start very early. And we're not really taught that when you're starting, in high school, you get taught accounting, but not what this means for you. And that for me is something that we've kind of learned throughout our journey of starting working and learning to, manage our finances on our own. And I think it's really important to be cognizant of saving and putting money aside and living within your means, because I think there's the inclination to want to kind of splurge, and you're on your own now, you can do whatever you want. And I think starting small, and just building that habit of saving, building that habit of putting something aside that's not for your daily consumption, your daily use, builds up a good kind of behavior in yourselves for, obviously as you progress with your affluence, especially in a professional environment where appearances are, very important in certain areas. I think building that small habit is really important. So financial well-being and living within our means, but also putting away for future, for a rainy day, something that we feel very strongly about.
Yeah, and I suppose, one of the things that will always come up is that your average South African, the money that goes in is the money that must go out in order for them to survive. So I think I've always found, when we talk about saving, it always becomes difficult when you speak to those individuals who find it hard to manage the cash because, it's, what did they say, hand to mouth? Yeah, so every check that comes in goes out. But yes, 100%, if you don't find a way to actually, keep some of that, you will never stop being hand to mouth. So it's a very important lesson, I think.
Yeah, and I think you are 100% on the head, and I think it's always about doing it to your capability, and that's the most important thing. And it's not about putting pressure on anyone to feel as though this is what they have to do, but it's something that I think and particularly in a situation where someone goes into a professional career, or starting their professional journey, it's not something that we're ever told or, it's introduced to us if out of necessity and not necessarily because we've planned in our mind that this needs to happen.
No, I think, we're getting a pretty good understanding of who Adithi Naidu is, specifically in the professional setting. But is there anything you want to share for people who maybe want to know a bit more, so outside the professional setting? Who else is Adithi? What are some of the things that you're interested in?
Sure. I think I've been telling people for the longest time that I'm the kind of person where I describe myself as lazy, but that's probably a really bad thing to say on a career podcast. But I think it's the interesting thing that I found about myself, especially through this whole lockdown situation, is that when you're forced to concentrate and focus on yourself, you really find those little things that make you happy. Something that that I've gotten into very strongly during this time is baking, and I've now just gone completely off the rails with that, and it's something that I find such joy in. And it's one of those things where it's like I get to be very technical around the things that I want to be, but it's also you get to be, like I said, creative with something and make something beautiful and exciting and that tastes good. So I've really found that to be quite a lot of fueling a lot of my personal passion at the moment, and that's kind of where I find my joy personally. And that's pretty much me as a person. Is just a combination of wanting to be a nerd 50% of the time and wanting to be this full-blown creative the other 50% of the time.
Yeah. Well, I guess, based on all the questions I've asked you now, is there maybe anything else that you feel you want to add that maybe I haven't asked you about?
I think when it comes to when I always think about what it felt like starting out as a student studying and then moving into a professional career, or any career for that matter, I think one of the things that I've always been told throughout my career is to be more assertive. Personally, I'm not that kind of person. I'm very much I've been told peacekeeper, which I never ever like those labels, but it is what it is. And it's something I've had to learn with my career. But more than anything, being assertive is one thing, but always being willing and open to learn. And that's something, I'm not one of those people who can fake it till they make it kind of people. I'm one of those people who will be like, listen, Tavang, this is where my area that I'm not super strong in. Can you help me? And is there something that I can learn from you in that area? And I think having that mindset is something that has helped me throughout my career. So whilst it's a personal choice, that would be my advice. It's always being open to learn, because there are always going to be smarter, more accomplished, more experienced people around you, and it would be a miss to not see what you can gain from that and learn from that.
Yeah. No, I mean, personally, I think you feel very, what's the word? But for your very useful insight. I really appreciate you coming, and I'm hoping for everyone at home you've also enjoyed hearing from Adithi. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. Of course, remember to like the video if you did like it. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content, and thank you for joining us once again. Adithi, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. It's been lovely.
Awesome.